his categorization. Then he has Islamic, which is most of North Africa into the Middle East and goes up into. Wait, let me see if I can. So you notice the Islamic. It goes from North Africa into Turkey, the Gulf, down to the western Somalia, and down to the coast. Here up into Iran, Afghanistan, Pakistan, and then up into the Caspian Sea, which is the republics which broke off from the Soviet Union. And this area is very rich in gas, and this area is very rich in oil. Okay? So the most, and it's the most strategic area because it covers 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 bodies of water. If not 6, the Black Sea and Caspian Sea 7. Okay, and he has a special categorization for Orthodox, which is interesting. So he has the Orthodox, all of Russia, minus China. But he doesn't have. Interestingly, there's no overlap between the Orthodox here and the Orthodox here in this region. The Eastern Orthodox. So he kind of this is also kind of the very blunt differentiation of regions according to geography. That the Orthodox is Eastern Europe, Russia extended, but not say Greece or say this region. This region is he says Islamic, but he's talking about, to be fair, he's talking about Islamic civilization. And then he's talking about Orthodox, the world civilizations. So even in his categorizations, he's not very accurate. Okay, but he groups regions according to the dominant faiths, not the intricate faiths. Okay, so we go back to the text. Where did we go? Oh, here. So we go back to the text. So any points or thoughts about what, after we've kind of explained a bit about Huntington's introduction, where do you see him as being Orientalist? You mentioned the othering. Okay, anything else? I'm unmuting you, and if you want to. If you go over the points of Paul.
Yes, Doctor.
Which do you see working here?
Can we consider the rituals of degradation?
To some extent, yes. What? But how does it show? For example, where would you have some sort of aspect of the ritual of degradation?
When he represent the young Middle Eastern or young the youth people who put the bomb between their paws.
Yes. Yes. That would be kind of an aspect of degradation. And anything else? Othering is obvious, the obvious one, but you will have several otherings. But what else is there? It's not apparent at the beginning, but it's kind of it takes on form when we come to the second part. It becomes more clear. If the one of the 3 points or in Hull, when it talks about discourse, do you sense that Huntington is presenting an innocent discourse? Yes. Failure to recognize differences, yes, is a problem. Is a clear problem. Particularly the stereotyping. And the way he distributes or categorizes the globe geographically doesn't recognize differences within each region. That you have maybe the Eastern Orthodox within the what he calls the Arab or the Islamic region. So the Orthodox is not just exclusively Russian and Greek and but even Greece is it's not exclusively Russian and Eastern European. In representing the other in Hull's in Hull's book, there is also if a discourse can be innocent. When we went over discourse, if it is innocent or not. Do you think that Huntington's discourse here is innocent, or there's something else going on? If there's something else going on, then why? What is happening? Is there an idealization where he kind of presents a particular idea, imposes a particular idea about people or certain religions, and whether he is trying to claim a regime of truth, that what he's proposing is the truth, is the new truth that everybody needs to be aware of. And what is he promoting as one of the truths? If there are truths which he claims to be which he claims monopoly over, one of the truths is that there is a clash of civilization. Okay, but which civilizations is he focusing on the clash on? When you see the subtext in the text. Okay, that's one thing. And why with the clash of civilization is there a remaking of the world order? Who will be remaking the world order? How? What are the means of remaking the world order? It is through the language, the English language, through the Davos people, for example, and is it through a certain type of way to achieve modernity? Okay, any other ideas? What else is there? Sexual fantasy, that doesn't apply here. It's not into that. Rituals of degradation, yes, you mentioned that. And if there's anything else in the summary, if there are anything in between, you can let me know. The other thing is that with regard to Huntington, is that most of his references, they are, even though he's talking about other civilizations and other culture, he's not giving references to people or authors or scholars from those other cultures. Most of his sources are if you look at the footnotes, most of his sources are from Eurocentric, and therefore he is claiming knowledge about other regions based on authors who are not from the region, who are from the Western disciplines and schools of thought. Okay. Any questions? You should have some more idea about how to tackle this paper assignment, and I hope this is kind of useful for you. Okay. Any questions?
Doctor, he spoke. I read something about the desires. That he mentioned that mostly which is control the humans is the desire for sex, for trade, for these things. But I don't know that we will cover it later or we already pass it.
Where? In Huntington?
Yeah, I read it.
You read it here in this text?
Yes, but I will look in which page, and if I found it, I will inform.
Wait.
That the desire is controlling the human agency.
Okay, maybe we will come to it.
Thank you.
Inshallah. We'll see. But then you have something. Then it goes back to this kind of realist, conservative approach that what controls human nature is selfish desire and greed. In the documentary, you had. Bandar bin Sultan said that we didn't create corruption. Okay, it's human nature. That's one kind of thing. Then you had another Friedman, Milton Friedman. He's an economist, but his theory of economy were the destruction of the leftist, more popular political programs and groups in Chile, Guatemala, Argentina, and Central America in the 50s, 60s, and 70s, which is also mentioned in the documentary. Also, you have this. Then we have this other person who says that human nature and greed is maybe a Thatcherite version. Thatcher going to Margaret Thatcher. So many of he says that this is one version. It is not. There's another whole possibility of collective collectivity based on justice and compassion, not just greed and killing. And then you had one from the I think the New York Times or Washington Post. He was fired from the Washington Post because he wrote an article against Bush in 2003, and he says that as a reporter he has been in he was in Baghdad, Afghanistan, and he says, how can you come out of Gaza not feeling angry? Okay, and he also says later on in the program that many of my friends were not able to live with this loss of what it means to be human and to establish contact with another human being because of the trauma of what they have seen. And he says many of them are not here. I mean, they committed suicide. They couldn't live with themselves. Yeah, the shock. Not that they were practicing this, but that they were witness to this, and they couldn't establish recreate or re-establish human communication with other on a very, very fundamental existential level, which kind of brings one out of the deep hole of trauma. Okay, so and then you have the dealers who make money out of all this, and said that it's all about profit, and there's no problem with making excuses for wars or continuation of wars. And then you had Barack Obama in the UN saying that we need to intervene to prevent the sectarian violence, which reminds us of what Terry Rod Larson was speaking about how the region is evolving a new type of war, with the type of war that is between peoples of the region, because your region is so diverse, and because you have no culture of resolving differences by peaceful means, you are always going to be violent. And therefore, this kind of discourse of what the projection of the region by Terry Rod Larson or even Samuel Huntington before him, or any of the politicians like Barack Obama or others, is the discourse that kind of generates the agendas of the Davos people. Well, obviously, Barack Obama was one of those who attended the Davos. Just as there are Israelis as well as Arabs, as well as from other regions, and there are those who go to Davos and make a point and object and then walk out, like Tayyip Erdogan at some point when he confronted Shimon Peres about Gaza, 2008. Okay, you can Google that. He walked out of the discussion. So. Yeah, well, so I'm glad that some of you are able to benefit from the lessons, which is why if I left you to read these on your own, you would not get it. Okay, so hopefully this kind of helps you pull in the material that you have covered, that you have read so far, analyzed so far, so that they begin to speak to each other and enhance your knowledge about things and issues which are very, very relevant to the global politics, global studies, and affecting our region in particular. Okay, so we'll continue now with the universal civilizations, the sources. The sources of universal civilization. What are the components? Here it's very detailed and there's a particular path or trajectory. So we see how much we can cover from this right now. So the concept of universal civilization is a distinctive product of Western civilization. So therefore, universal civilization is a product it can come only out of Western civilization. It cannot come out of Eastern civilization. So in this sense, universal civilization is Western-centric. Now he explains, in the 19th century, when we go back to the 19th century, the idea of white man's burden helped justify the extension of Western political and economic domination over non-Western societies. So you had the colonialism, white man's burden, to civilize the non-white people. And therefore, it is like the task that he has to do reluctantly, but nobody else can do it, so he is the one who does it, with all the ramifications of this colonial time. But it's also white man's burden coupled with the formation of modern states. We go back to the 19th century, the 1800s. And in other texts. So here's the same in Western revolution and the impact of that. At the end of the 20th century, the concept of universal civilization helps justify Western culture dominance over other societies and the need for those societies to ape Western practices and institutions. This sentence is very, 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 how would you say, Orientalist. Can you explain why? And if you can, which word is the main indicator?
Is it about the ape? To ape
Exactly.
To
What is ape?
It's just copying of Western practices, social aspects.
Yes, but he could have used copying or kind of mimicking. Why ape?
In a way of you need someone else to do that thing for you.
No, what is an ape?
يقلد.
No. Yeah, it's the secondary meaning. But what does ape mean? Ape is a monkey.
Oh, it's a monkey as a noun.
Yeah, so what you do? What monkey does?
For experiments or something like this.
No. It is that the monkey kind of imitates you. Okay, so therefore, all the monkey can do is imitate what you do. They imitate each other or something. So therefore, the other societies would ape. So he's no. It is if you're in this region and somebody calls you an ape, it's very insulting. Okay, and not only the word that you call me a monkey, which has very
Orientalist approach.
But why? There's a whole body of knowledge about the human evolution from apes to humans. The Darwin survival of the evolution, the theory of evolution.
Oh, Darwin theory, yes.
Okay, so if you're an ape, you're still in the Stone Ages, prehistoric. Even though you may look like human, but you're actually a reminder of the human ancestor. Still needs to evolve before you can become human in the Western form of culture. So this is one. It is copying. He could have used another word than ape if he was considerate about the other society. But this shows that there's an emotional baggage which kind of seeps into, which kind of spills into the text, showing how much قديش متحامل على الغير. مش انه عم بيستخدم مصطلحات مثل موضوعيه انه مثلا ينسخ او مثلا يقلد، لا، عم بقول يقلد مثل القردة، يقرد، تقريد. يعني if we want to talk about aping. Now, if you're West, you can say in the Western language or in English, there are terms that you use which are acceptable, which in different language contexts would be unacceptable. They would be very insulting. For example, you say the watchdog. Okay, the watchdog of a government is actually the institution that holds the institution of government accountable and checks about its performance. Now, if you say الكلب المراقب, you wouldn't call a whole body, official body, الكلب المراقب للدولة. يعني زي المراقبين هم الكلاب. اللي لها تداعيات ثانية بعيد عنكم، لها تداعيات ثانية في المصطلحات يعني. Or the underdog. كمان the underdog who is under، يعني اللي هو المدعوس حاله في الهرم السياسي، أو مثلا في قصة، أو مثلا في رواية. إيش كمان؟ وفي عندك ape هذا إنه يقلد. إيش كمان؟ So you have different terms which can refer to people as animals, or institutions or bodies as animals by the adjective of the verb rather than being articulate or precise. So this kind of gives some sort of indication about how the language is used and where it is used and how it regards other people. Okay. No. In other cultures, for example, if you call somebody an eagle, then or even in our culture, if you call, it depends on what type of animal you call. If you call him a lion, then that's a good thing. If you call him an eagle, it's a good thing. But if you call him something else, other groups of the family animal kingdom, then there might be problems. Okay. So there is here this kind of the others would ape Western practices and institutions. Universalism is the ideology of the West for confrontations with non-Western cultures. So what he's focusing on now is universalism. It's not globalism. It's universalism. Is that everything on the globe? But here he's not talking about a means of consumption, a means of power. It's an ideology. He's talking about an ideology, a way of thinking. Universalism is the ideology of the West for confrontations with non-Western cultures. So therefore, if non-Western cultures go into themselves, يتقوقعوا في ذاتهم. Therefore, universalism is the way to kind of counter that. You say that we are for humanity. So therefore, universalism here, in a way, in Huntington's project, has to do with promoting a monopoly of humanity, of what it is to be the human. Okay, it's a form of monopoly of truth, monopoly of value system of what it is to be human, as opposed to being isolated in your own cultural or geographical setting. As is often the case with marginals or converts among the most enthusiastic proponents of the single civilization idea are intellectual migrants of the to the West. So, intellectual migrants are the ones who are most apt to become involved in this universalism. So, if you have هجرة العقول, بصفي برضه هجرة القيم للقيم المستوردة للعقول هاي, واللي بصفي هم ناطقي بأبواق الكونية هاي, الuniversalism. وبحكي عن West such as Naipaul and Fuad Azmi. Fuad Azmi is Iranian and the of origin, and he is a well-known author of books about this region. But he speaks with the language of the West, not the authentic of here, even though he analyzes here. For whom the concepts provides a highly satisfying answer to send to the question, who am I? What white man's nigger, however, in the term, one Arab intellectual applied to these migrants, and the idea of a universalization finds little support in other civilizations. Okay. What other indicators are of Orientalism in this sentence? Okay, are you with me? I unmuted you. Okay.
I think maybe the using of the word nigger.
That's one, yes. Is that if I mean, he could have used a more less how do you say, less racial term. Okay. This word, if you say it in the United States, it's a big problem. You can be sued. Yeah? Why? Because what is?
It goes for the African American, so it's a bad word. So African American can say the N word, but other races they can't. They become very angry because يعني هو زنجي. الكلمة معناها مرادفة زنجي. But it's about how to say sorry.
Yes, but
sorry لأنه كانوا عبيد.
Yes, so it's the term that they used in slave.
Yes, slavery time.
Slavery.
Yes.
So therefore, when you use that term, you're celebrating the slavery the slavery period.
Yes, exactly.
And therefore, you are degrading the human, because a slave, when we talked about Locke, the whole concept of a slave is that the slave is dead, essentially. As a human being, it's a dead biological being.
True.
Yeah, the only thing that is alive is the body. But slavery as a category, political category, I'm not talking about human. I'm talking about the political stratification of the slave is that you are not human, you are only a biological body, like cattle, like any other living being that is non-human. And therefore, any living being that is non-human you have license to use them as a resource.
Yes, and that's why the American, at the time of slavery, they used the Afro-American and put them in the zoo as like any animal. They did not saw them as a human being, as just a creature in the slavery time. And that's why the African-American hate this word.
Yeah, no, well, why they, okay, that's another story. That was when the Europeans wanted to display African societies. They would take a whole tribe, put them in a display place and a confined place, and then therefore the Europeans would come and see how they would live. Okay, this is kind of late 18th century, early 19th century way of kind of displaying other societies. So therefore, rather than Europeans going to Africa to see how other societies were living, they would bring a tribe or a family from Africa to a place in say Germany or Holland or other places. So you have this cultural zoos, yeah. And therefore, and people would then be able to see that the idea would be this would be a way for Europeans to see other cultures and other societies without leaving Europe, without leaving the comfort of Europe, going just for buying tickets for some time, and therefore seeing that and going back home to their home without having to travel the whole distance. So that was the part of the this kind of zoo concept, yeah. But it was not only in the United States; it was also in Europe. And you can Google that kind of human zoos. But the point here is that okay, so if those who leave this region and go to the West, they face a cultural challenge of redefining who they are. Okay, so this Huntington is promoting that universalism is as an ideology is a way for those who do question who they are or still are figuring out who they are to plug into this universalism. And this universalism will give them a project or a way of their being, other than being the slave of the white man or the slave of the Orientalist. In other words, if you want to change the terms. So the Arab intellectual applied these to migrants. So now, what does he do? Here, rather than say that Huntington doesn't say that he is calling the Arabs who migrate as white man slaves. He kind of says that the Arab intellectual himself Paul asked himself whether he was a white man's slave. So even though what Huntington wants to say is that are these new slaves? Yes, they are new slaves of the West. But he's using by word of mouth, not of himself, of the Arab intellectual who asked this question about himself. So therefore, he's using somebody else's words to say what he wants to say, and somebody else whom is conveniently the one whom he wants to say he's taking the words from is the one coming from the region where he is antagonistic towards. So therefore, you have Arab intellectuals calling yourselves as white man's slaves, and therefore the whole region is a slave of the Western white. If you want to maximize or go interpret this on other levels. And the idea of the universal civilization finds little support in other civilizations. Okay, for him it's obvious that universal civilization is only a very advanced form of civilization coming out of only an advanced form of civilization, the Western civilization. Other civilizations which have not reached this advanced point cannot talk about universal civilization. So even he's safe for him, even though China may be in the future a challenger to the West, he still would assume that China can never talk about the universal civilization because it will always be talking about Chinese interests and perspective, not trying to go global and dominate globally in terms of the cultural, and it doesn't need to promote a universal civilization. By its economy, the strength of its economy, the strength of its technology, the strength of its knowledge, the strength of its people, the strength of its the number of people, that's 1/3 of the human population. All these strengths compensate for having to create a universal civilization concept ideology. Okay. Now, those who find themselves in the risk of losing dominance need to create an ideology, not a Cold War ideology, an ideology of countering other civilizations. So in the Cold War, you had the good, the Western good, and the evil of the Soviets. In the universal civilization, you have the good of this universal civilization, and every other civilization is lacking or is primitive, with slaves and apes. You see what he's saying? Okay, so it is obvious. It then becomes obvious what his intellectual baggage is. Okay, but if you're reading this very quickly, you could just take them as an adjective, as an idiom. You do not go beyond what he's trying to say. So the argument that some sort of universal civilization is emerging rests on one or more of these three assumptions as to why it should be the case. First, he talks about assumptions. First, there is the assumption discussed in chapter 1. The collapse of the Soviet communism meant that the end of history and the universal victory of liberal democracy. This is what Fukuyama talked about, is that because the Soviet experiment failed, therefore the only dominant or victor in the human history is the liberal democracy, and therefore history ends with liberal democracy. This is the argument of Fukuyama, and therefore the end of history, throughout the world. This argument suffers from a single fallacy. It is rooted in the Cold War perspective that the only alternative to communism is liberal democracy. Okay, and that the demise of the first produces the universality of the second. Okay, he says, okay, this works if you have the other, but if the other is not clear, then you need to create another. Obviously, however, there are many forms of authoritarianism, nationalism, corporatism, and market communism, such as China, that are alive and well in today's world. More significantly, they are all religions, alternatives that lie outside the world's secular ideologies. In the modern world, religion is central to is perhaps the central force that motivates, mobilizes people. Why? Because the East-West ideology has collapsed. The discourse of the East, Western discourse about the East in the Cold War depended heavily on the other, that the other exists. If you remove the other, the discourse doesn't work, because there is no other to other. And then the us becomes meaningless, loses its identity without the other. So this is kind of a classic predicament of Orientalism. And you can say that Cold War is a discourse of Orientalism because it's binary. It has one of the attributes of Orientalism in that it is binary. It is us and the other. And the us defines themselves by creating the other. If the other is gone, the us loses its identity, and therefore Huntington is promoting a project to revamp or reinvigorate the Western identity, but with a new identity by creating a new other. Okay, and therefore this new other would then reboot the us-other dynamic of the Cold War, but in a different context, or post-Cold War context. Okay, and we talked about this when we talked about the settlers. If the settlers are not part of the Turner's hypothesis or thesis of the frontier, is that the frontier is what shaped the identity of the American by how and what they practiced in the frontier. And therefore, if there is no other to be practiced upon in the frontier, the one who is the settler colonial loses their identity. And therefore, in our context, the settlers without the Palestinians do not have an identity because they have nobody to work against. Okay, so whereas the Palestinians, if the Zionist system were to collapse, they would still have their identity. Now, the influence of neoliberal and globalization and all this would still have an impact, but in essence, you would still be able to find your root identity or still have maintained it. Your identity is not dependent on the existence of the other. But in settler, colonial, and Orientalist discourse, their very dependence and their reason of existing and their project depends on othering the other. And the other should be the evil one, or the backward one, or the one who is prehistoric, or the animal, or the slave. And the us is the one who is the civilized, the advanced, and the knowledgeable, and the one who has the language, and the one who is capable of making a new religion. Can you imagine? This is a very very confident way of claiming that you can make your own religion if other religions do not work. And therefore he's promoting a global religion or universal religion as being part of the universal civilization, a new one. So the arguments that some sort of universal civilization is emerging rest on, okay, this is the first assumption. The second assumption is, obviously, however, there are many forms of authority, in the modern world, religion is central. Its sheer Soviet communism has collapsed, So here it says, it's sheer hubris to think that the Soviet Union communism has collapsed, the West has won the world for all time, and that the Muslims, Chinese, Indians, and others are going to rush to embrace Western liberalism as the only alternative. the Cold War division of humanity is over. The more fundamental division of humanity in terms of ethnicity, religion, and civilizations remain a spawn new conflicts. So therefore, these ethnicity, the multiplicity of religions, civilizations, and ethnic groups are the factors that generate new conflicts. So second, there is the assumption that increased interaction among peoples, trade, investment, tourism, media, electronic communication generally, is generating a common world culture, which is what he's talking about globalization. Improvements in transport and communication technology have indeed made it easier and cheaper to move money, goods, people, knowledge, ideas, and images around the world. Okay, no doubt exists as to the increased international traffic of these items. Much doubt exists, however, as to the impact of these increased traffic. Does trade increase or decrease in likelihood of conflict? The assumption that is that it reduces the probability of war between nations is at the minimum not proven. Here we're talking about neoliberal or new liberals who assume that we will come to this when we talk about the different paradigms in global studies. So there is there are three groups of new liberals. One group assumed that if you establish democracy, you are less likely to have war amongst democratic systems, because democracies rarely go to war against each other. You need a different system to go to war with another system. It's not the same system when you talk about liberal democracy. Second, the liberal group of liberals say that if you enhance economic activity and trade, you also reduce the probability of conflict, because they become mutual dependent on each other. They become there becomes invested interest in establishing, in not disrupting the economic ties and relationships. And part of this was the attempt by Shimon Peres when he established the New Middle East, the foundation for the New Middle East, which focused on economy to try to bring peace rather than political settlement. So which was part of the practice of or an implementation of this kind of second group. The third group said that you need to I forget. We will come to that. So the assumption that it reduces the probability of war, okay. So he goes about examples. However, international trade was at record highs, yet it was the beginning of the First World War. Analysis done in the 1990s throw that assumption further into question. One study concludes that increasing levels of trade may be highly divisive force for international politics. So, according to Huntington, trade does not resolve the problem of ethnicity, religion, and civilizations, and potential for new conflict to arise. The failure of trade communications produce peace or common feelings of is not consonant with findings of social science. So he's kind of negating that. And then he goes to there's the third one. As increased communications, trade, and travel, multiplicity, and interaction among civilizations, people increasingly accord greater relevance to their civilizational identity. Two Europeans, one German, one French, interacting with each other will identify each other as German and French. Two Europeans and Germans and one French interacting with two Arabs, one Saudi and Egyptian, will definitely call themselves Europeans and Arabs. So the different categorizations based on whom you're interacting with, which is also kind of a binary thing. Us and other on the European scale, us and other on European, Middle East or Arab region scale, and us and other beyond. North African immigrants, French generates hostility among French. At the same time, increased receptivity of immigration by European Catholic Poles. So so the French are more likely to absorb people coming from Poland who are European Catholic than the African non-Christian coming from another continent and migrating into France. Americans react far more negatively to Japanese investment than to larger investments of Canada, European countries. Why? Because they are of different cultures. Okay. And we will finish here.
زغرت؟
And Igbo may be an Oweri. Okay, so from sociology, globalization theory produces a similar conclusion in an increasingly globalized world characterized by historically exceptional degrees of civilization, societal and other modes of interdependence, and widespread consciousness thereof. There is an exacerbation of civilization, society, ethnic self-consciousness, and global religious revival. So he's talking about the global religious revival as a result of the fall of the Soviet Union, which leaves an ideological gap for people to try to find themselves who they are in the new world. But the main people who are trying to find, who are questioning or trying to find a new identity in the new world are not the people, the minds migrating from this region to the West. It is actually the West that is trying to find its new identity, and hence what Huntington is promoting as a project for the West, particularly of the United States. Your new identity is defined by promoting universal language, universalism, a new civilization in which English is the predominant language, and everybody else, particularly the most dominant religion that is emerging, Islam, is the other. The Western modernization. We'll do this on Tuesday. Any questions? I would urge you to if you've reread this section now that you have heard this session, and try to give more depth to what you are reading here, and be more critical. And we'll begin next session by getting your feedback on what you got out of this section when it talks about modernization and what are the components and responses to the Western modernization, and what are the ways to become modern. Okay?
Okay, Doctor, thank you. So we have a class on Tuesday, right?
Yes, we have on Tuesday at 1 o'clock. Again, okay. From 1 until 4 o'clock. We may need another session, but we will try to finish next Tuesday, or this Tuesday we'll finish Huntington so that you're able to write the paper.
Inshallah, Doctor. Thank you much.
يلا يعطيكم العافية. Okay, we will continue with the definition of Huntington's definition of universal civilization, and but first off, we're okay on Tuesday from 1 o'clock till 4 o'clock. If anybody has problems, let me know, and we might need another session either before or before the Eid or after the Eid, just before the exam, depending on how much material we're able to cover. Okay. Any questions with the paper or assignments, or I assume you have read Huntington. And if you have any questions before we start going into the details. I have unmuted you also. I think you can speak if there's anything. The third term, universal civilization, may refer to the assumptions, values, and doctrines currently held by many people in Western civilization and by some people in other civilizations. So this might be called the Davos culture. So the Davos culture, he's referring to the World Economic Forum in Davos, which is held every year in Switzerland, in which politicians, economic influential people, and heads of big institutions, global institutions, and companies attend. And there is this kind of forum where they all discuss economic matters, political matters, and things affecting the globe and the political economy. And they are a small group of people, but they hold very influential key positions in institutions and countries around the world, and therefore there's this sort of group that is able to make decisions and policies, discussing certain issues and matters, aside from their peoples and other influencing bodies. So each year about 1,000 businessmen, bankers, government officials, intellectuals, and journalists from scores of countries come to the Economic Forum. Obviously they hold university degrees in various disciplines: physical sciences, social, business, law, and basically the language of communication there is English. And so he's focusing there, therefore, that on the English language that is able to group or bring together many people, influential people from different disciplines, different parts of the world, different cultures, and with different economic or educational credentials and backgrounds. And these are the people who are able to shape markets, economies, policies, and democracy in the Western civilization and the other parts of the world. Okay, so the Davos culture hence is tremendously important worldwide. However, how many people share this culture outside the West? It's probably less than 50 million per one people, or 1% of the world's population. So you're talking about 1% of the world's population who are very influential in determining policies, economics, and issues of regarding the world and peoples of the world. Primarily, the language culture is English. Could be other languages, but English is the primary mode of communication, language of communication, and therefore you have this kind of shared interest in shaping policy and decision making and the political atmospheres of this particular group, and to make the world function in a particular way by this 1%. Now they have a secure grip on power on their societies, and this common intellectual culture exists only at the elite level. Its roots are shallow in many societies. So this is an elite group, but they don't have a popular base for their policies and standing, which means that at some point there could be complications or uprisings which these people cannot control, even though they might be shaping the circumstances which affect these political shifts, and they also have a common moral culture, set of common values, and distinct from a common intellectual culture, according to the Hadley book. Okay, so these people have a certain value set system, which they have also in common. They share in common, but it's not necessarily representing all the cultures of the world. Just on a note, before last time when we did the first, there is on this line from the first description, only semantic confusion, however, is gained by restricting civilization to the global level and designating of culture sub-civilizations, those largest cultural entities which have historically always been called civilizations. So he is differentiating between cultures and cultures, which he calls or determines as being below civilizations. But he has a term. He explains the term, that what he means by his definition of civilization is more kind of fluid than the definition by the Hayward Alker. The idea of a world civilization by defining civilization as the highest cultural grouping of people and the broadest level of cultural identity, have short of that which distinguishes humans from other species. So he's talking here. The definition talks about a defined civilization, where of being the highest cultural group of people. So there are several groups of people in this definition, and Huntington says that he is a bit more relaxed in the definition to include cultures as being part of possible civilizations, and under his definition. So he says, I relaxed that definition to allow the possibility of peoples throughout the world identifying with a distinct global culture, which supplements or supplants civilization in Western, Islamic, or cynic sense. So here he kind of broadens the definition to be inclusive, to portray or to show that he would include in his broader definition non-Western civilizations, Islamic, Chinese, or others. So in his use of the term, it's not the rigid one by Alker. And this is a way to kind of say that everybody who reads, he says that the way the term has been used in this by most civilizations. In this chapter, however, I relaxed the definition to allow possibility for people of peoples throughout the world in identifying with distinct global culture. So therefore, he's addressing the reader from various parts of the world to kind of interface or interact with what he's discussing. So the point here is that this is part of making the reader, or kind of capturing the reader, or bringing the reader into what he's trying to propose, or what he's talking about. Fourth, the idea is advanced of a spread is advanced at the spread of Western consumption patterns and popular culture around the world, creating a universal culture. This argument is neither profound nor relevant. Cultural fads are transmitted from civilization to civilization throughout history. Innovations of one civilization are regularly taken up by other civilizations. These are, however, either techniques lacking in significant cultural consequences of fads or outcomes and go without altering underlying culture and recipient civilizations. So what is he saying here? He's trying to say that if one culture is consuming the products of another culture, it does not necessarily mean that the consumer of the products of the other culture has become the same as the culture of the exporter of the goods. So therefore, just by using, for example, if you use maybe LG products, it doesn't mean that you've become Korean, South Korean, and that you have adopted the South Korean culture. You just kind of use a particular item which is manufactured and exported from that region, and therefore he kind of at the end he talks about the Magna Carta and Magna Mac, in which he's playing with the words. So the argument now is that the spread of pop culture and consumer goods around the world represents a triumph of Western civilization, trivializes Western culture. The essence of Western civilization is the Magna Carta, not the Magna Mac. The fact that non-Westerners may bite into the latter, the McDonald's or hamburger, has no implications of their accepting the former, that they accept the Magna Carta. Now, Magna Carta was a treaty that resolved conflicts or rivalry between British king in the 13th century and his rivals in the barons and dukes and the other groups. So therefore they arrived at an agreement, and this Magna Carta was a way of resolving conflict without or internal rivalry for power through an agreement rather than bloodshed and internal fighting. So implicitly here he said, if we bring back what Terje Larsen was talking about, that our region has many ethnic groups, and therefore we do not have a cultural resolving internal conflict. It means that the Magna Carta culture is not present in, say, the Arab world or in this region. And therefore, you need, in order to be part of the Western civilization, you need to be able to arrive at resolving differences, rivalry through means other than violence and bloodshed. So, but what is also interesting is that the idea, if he's saying that the the spread of consumerism doesn't change the behavior or cultural patterns. And therefore he says that this is this argument is neither profound, it's not deep, and it is not relevant. What do you think about this proposition? I'm opening it to discussion. If you want to chat, can consumer behavior impact or affect culture? Any ideas, any thoughts?
Good afternoon, Doctor.
Good afternoon.
Yes. Mr. Huntington here, he tried to show us that the consumption the West to consume the Western product or culture, it's not enough to shape a universal civilization. So, but this is based on his view of universal civilization, because his view of universal civilization, it's more go with the intellectual. It's more than the consumption. It's with the values. It's with the institutions. It's about the West culture, the Western cultures.
Okay.
So,
but the question here that I was asking you all is does consumer behavior affect culture? He's saying that the consumer doesn't mean that you you become the culture of the one whom you are using their produce or technology. Okay.
Yes.
For the point saying that it is the consumer is not like the producer in terms of cultural and technological setting or standing or levels. Okay. So what?
Yes.
But if he's trying to say that you would agree that if you are using a certain product, it doesn't mean that you've imported the civilization of that product. Okay. But on the other hand, is there something else that could be happening which he does not say, which he tries to dismiss here?
Excuse me, can I speak?
Yeah.
All right. So I think he brings about this idea in the first place to show that, as he said, to show that the consumer is much different than the producer. So he treats the Westerns as the producers, while the non-Westerns are the consumers. All right. So by this point, he only adds to his argument being a discourse of othering.
Okay, that's a good point. So he's kind of making us and other, those us with the civilization and the capability of producing and exporting, and the other is who is only capable of importing, but without rising to the level of civilization of the first. Okay, that is a good point. But I'm talking about the idea. If what he's saying is that there are two things. There's one, what he's saying explicitly in the text, and there's something he's saying implicitly, which is not in the text, which is between the lines. So what he's saying in the text is what we've all said so far. Yeah. What he's not saying, which is also important, is that if you consume somebody else's products, it doesn't mean that it will change your behavior. So therefore, you're safe. You're safe from that other culture. For example, if you're an Eastern culture and there's animosity towards the West, okay? If you buy Western cars, it doesn't mean that you that you then become complicit or a partner in their civilizational project. So you understand what he's trying to say. So he's trying to say that you can buy the products, and if you do not want to be Western, you can not be Western as well. Okay, but what this means is that he's kind of assuming on a third level, between the lines, or on a second level between the lines, is that your behavior pattern doesn't change by consuming a certain product. Whereas in fact, the whole idea of marketing is to change behavior towards a certain product, so that it becomes part of your economic capabilities. Okay, so if you say you use LG, for example, LG products. Okay, to some extent, most of the marketing is that this is the best product that you can use, that you can buy, and if you do not have that, you are modern in what you have. So therefore, it creates several standards of what levels what you have, and then what economic level you are. If you buy, say, Philips, which is manufactured in Germany, it's different than buying some other mark which is made either in Taiwan or China or other locations. So therefore, what you have in a way affects how you conceive yourself, how you understand yourself to be in comparison to others within your society. And also the whole marketing issue is not collective. It is trying to bring in, or to try to focus on, the feelings of individualism, your own needs, not the needs of the whole people. So therefore, if you want to have maybe the best furniture, you will import it from Spain or Italy. You wouldn't opt. It wouldn't be your option to have it made locally. Even though the local, you could have very, very professional and gifted and artistic and gifted people who can make good, very excellent quality furniture. But you wouldn't do that because you didn't want to say that I had it locally made. There's a certain attachment to where it is imported and from where and what type. So therefore, in fact, even if you're not adopting or adapting or partnering with the civilization of the other, it is what you import and how you import and for what purposes you import has a way in affecting how you view yourself within your own culture. So therefore, there's this sort of transformation that is happening by being a consumer. Yeah, and the most obvious visualization of this fourth point in what Huntington is saying clearly in the text is that, okay, if you can build many skyscrapers and have modern technology and modern and big malls and big even Formula One tracks and football stadiums and whatnot, and even duty-free place, but it doesn't mean that you have culturally evolved to an advanced form of civilization. For example, you have Dubai, Abu Dhabi, and places like that, where you have all these items which show which mimic Western civilization, advanced civilization, but in essence is not. Okay, the challenge would be for those regions to produce their own, to bring their own engineers, bring their own, or even if they don't, invest in their youth to have their own engineers, their own capital holders, and their own people of knowledge to bring about the society. It is not a show society. You need to be able to make your own, produce your own needs to the extent possible. But buying something from the outside doesn't mean that you've become advanced in the terms of heritage and civilizational content, which is a valid point. Yeah, but by the same token, it is you end up with a consumer society that is mimicking the benefits of a Western advanced economic system. And adding values which change the value of the interaction with people of the region as being above or below certain standards. So the point here is that yes, if you buy something from another civilization, you are not becoming the other civilization. But at the same point, if the other civilization is focused on individual consumerism, and you are of a society which is more collective, group identity, there, or maybe more socialist or leftist program, there would be a clash. Okay, implicit clash, and he doesn't talk about this. So, which is a point to take. Also, then he talks about there's another explanation or example. He says that okay, you may have youth dressed in jeans, drinking coke, listening to rap and praying, but they're willing to bomb an American airline. Okay, so this is very. This statement is what? Apart from showing the point, implicitly it is what?
Can I talk, Doctor?
Yes.
It's showing or
you can. I will follow you on the chat as well.
Okay.
Yes.
Okay. It's about hostility. It's
Okay.
showing hostility toward Muslims, like kind of stereotyping.
Okay. The stereotype of the Muslim here, the one who bows to Mecca, is one that they think about kind of harming interests of others. Okay. Even though they wear jeans and drink coke or have hamburgers or whatnot. So therefore, this is the point. The point he's trying to make is that okay, even if you consume these, it doesn't mean that you have changed. Okay, but what is more than that is saying that he's using a stereotyping of young people of this region as being those who are the ones who cause the problems for the interests of the West. He didn't talk about the Chinese, nor did he talk about, say, Indian, nor did he talk about, say, Russian. Okay, he's talking about this region, which gives you a clue where he's directing his clash of civilization. Even though here he refers to Magna Carta, which is Britain. Okay, and even though he refers to Switzerland and the Davos. Okay, and even before he refers to the globe as a whole. Okay, so when he goes from global, he then kind of selectively goes to Davos for a particular point. Then he goes to he deals with China actually. Those imports, but he talks about China and Hindu culture as these imports take in the recipient civilization either because they are exotic or because they are imposed. In previous centuries, the Western world was periodically swept by enthusiasm over various items of China and Hindu culture in the 90s. Okay, so here he's saying that even Europe, at some point, was fascinated with Chinese and Hindu culture and food, spices and whatnot. Okay, but he doesn't address China and India as being hostile, nor does he stereotype their people. He just talks about them as being previous civilizations that had an impact. What he's not talking about is the Islamic civilization. And there really, obviously, the relationship there was not amicable with the Crusades and the rivalry over the Holy Land. Okay, so therefore, when he starts talking about people, he goes to this region, the Middle East, half a dozen young men, and then the stereotype that's what's on their mind would be this. Okay, so that even though they would be observant and have certain religious morality, their religious morality stops when it comes to affecting other people's interests. Here, in the sense of American, he's not talking about European or Western airline. He's talking about an American airline. So therefore, in this sentence, you understand from him that the clash is between basically America and the Middle East. Everything else is kind of camouflage, the way to kind of bring you into the Chinese, the Hindu, the European, and whatnot. It is there to kind of expand and give an idea, but essentially, this is the root of the clash is here, is in a statement like this. So this is what you need to, and it is very Orientalist, because there is obviously an using, us, we, who are the civilized, and the other who is hostile and even religiously hostile. Okay, so the problem is not just the people in this region. The problem is also their belief system. Okay, which is then becomes the. Now, if you weren't aware of or the general reader would just read these lines and go and say, oh, well, this is not kind of accurate, or he's kind of being stereotypical, and then stop there. But actually, this is the statement that kind of carries the whole book. The clash of civilization between whom, and on what basis? Okay. So therefore, then he goes after that. Right after that, he then goes to Japanese. So to kind of to dilute or to kind of make this point less impactful, he then distracts you going back into the consumer aspect of Japanese. So he goes into Japanese TVs, cameras, electronic gadgets, and indeed, while becoming considerably more antagonistic towards Japan. Only the naive can lead Westerners to assume that non-Westerners will become Westernized by acquiring these goods. So it goes back to the main point. But the crux of the whole book is here. Okay? So this is also, you need to be aware of when somebody is saying something which is very fundamental. Okay, and then and then making that fundamental less clear by distracting you with some other information to follow the point. This is tactical way of kind of bringing in the reader. Okay, so after this serious, obviously for Huntington, there are different readers. So there are those from the Taoist people who read his book. And there are those from the Japanese or the Hindu or the Chinese who read his book. Each one will read his book, the same text, in a different way. This item is designed for the Taoist people. This sets a global policy towards the region. Okay? This is for the consumer of the world. Okay? So therefore, and for the other ones who are not the policy makers. So therefore, even the text itself, how he builds it, it has different. If you want to, you can do this later on after the course. Color, you can highlight in red which is the clash of civilization. Highlight in green which has to do with consumerism. Highlight in the orange which has to do with other cultures and how he uses introduces the other cultures as being neutral or kind of not that threatening. Okay, so then you will understand how many readers, how many ways the same text can be read by different people, depending on what they are focusing on. Okay, so a slightly more sophisticated version of the universal culture argument focuses on the consumer goods generally, but not the media. The Hollywood rather than Coca-Cola, American control of global movie, television, video industries, etc. So he's saying that another way of consumerism is like movies and films and from the United States. And the Americans are the most dominant one in the global basis regarding the films and the series. Okay, so therefore, what he's trying to say is that even if you consume this kind of entertainment, it doesn't affect your behavior. So he comes to the second point that entertainment, as Michael Blahos has said, does not equate to cultural conversion. Second, people interpret communications in terms of their own pre-existing values and perspectives. Okay, so the same visual image transmitting simultaneously in the living rooms across the globe Kishro observes trigger opposite perceptions. Okay, it's interesting as well is that he's using in his material what we just explained. Do you see? There are 2 points here. The first point is that he says that if you are a consumer of the kind of the film industry of the Americans, it doesn't mean that you become American. You can try to mimic, try to do like the Americans, but it doesn't make you American. Okay, so that's an obvious point. But it does not mean in the reverse that if you are entertaining yourself with this type of kind of artistic or film or theatrical entertainment that it doesn't affect you. Yeah, what means of entertainment you use is also a signature or kind of also characterizes how you are. Okay, if your entertainment is sports, okay, then you're more sports inclined, but it doesn't mean that you're athletic. You could be very unathletic, but be very interested in sport, in a particular sport, such as football, soccer, or something else. But other forms of entertainment could be destructive. For example, very violent movies or films that have child abuse, women abuse, people's abuse, and very explicit. So all these kind of have an effect. So the way you entertain yourself is not neutral. It has also an impact on how your characteristics and who you are, and it could make you isolate from your group context. Okay, and it could affect your behavior as well. So therefore, on the one hand, consuming doesn't mean that you import the culture of the other. But at the same time, it doesn't mean that you are not affected by what you consume, which is the point that Huntington does not make. Okay. So Western living rooms and this is the first point I was making. The second point is that, like reading Huntington's text, watching a movie can have different perspectives. So therefore, implicitly, he's saying that reading my book, you can also have different perspectives in reading my book about Clash of Civilizations, depending on where you are in the globe, what your level of intellectual level is, what your goal is, and what your aspirations are. So Western living rooms applaud when cruise missiles strike Baghdad. This is when we're talking about right after the 1991 war. Most living outside see that the West will deliver swift retribution to non-white Iraqis or Somalis, but not to white Serbians. Dangerous signal by any standard. So therefore, he's acknowledging that you can read how wars are being done in different regions, in different ways. If you are from the region, you say that this is external interference in the region, making problems, making conflict, and therefore anybody who stands against the Western interest would then be handled through force, such as Iraq or Somalia at the time. But if you are, for example, in the West, you would say that, well, this is why would you hit Baghdad? Because they have the youth that would be willing to attack an airline. So therefore, if you have this, then this becomes acceptable, or kind of more acceptable than not. If you are in that region, if you are an arms dealer, you have an interest in using this type of military force in the region. Why? Because the region is very rich in resources. So there's an open market there's a big market for arms, and therefore, since it's in order to maintain this market for arms, you need to maintain conflict. This what was in the documentary called Perpetual War. it's a war that goes on and on and on, and that has no aim. But implicitly, the aim of the war is just to have the war. Why? Because other people or countries or big corporations benefit from the economic profits of this sort of industries. So, global communication. So, global communications are one of the most important contemporary manifestations of Western power. So, therefore, the Western hegemony. So, also he talks about news outlets like CNN and other news outlets that are able to influence the perception of the people's consciousness. But also, what has since arrived is we have other global news networks that have different perspectives, such as Al Jazeera, for example, to name others. Okay, so then we move on to another aspect, which is language, which is part of this global civilization. Any questions so far? Do you begin to see how sophisticated Huntington is, even though he's using very simple language?
Doctor, I have one question, please.
Yes.
When he focused on the American airliner, American case, so does that mean that he's referring to the idealism, or the idealism is something different? Thank you.
What do you mean by idealism?
Idealism, that you look to the US as an example for the European countries to be followed. That the European countries or other Western countries, they will look for the US as an example to be followed.
I will deal with. There's later on in the text we will come to that. He
sure.
kind of to say whether the US is the one that is carries is at the forefront of this kind of conflict, or somebody else. That we will come to that. But basically, but in short, yes, he's why? Remember, this is right after the Cold War. There were two superpowers, the United States and the Soviet Union. When the Soviet Union collapses, you have only one superpower. So therefore, obviously, within the time frame when this was written, he's obviously assuming that the United States will be the dominant power. But the United States and the whole industry that was built on the Cold War, particularly the arms industry, the fear of the other, with the collapse of the other, the Soviet Union, you need to create a new fear. But the new fear is not a country. It could be countries, but it's not a country. It's a whole people in a whole region. So therefore, and why this whole people in a whole region? Because the whole region is very rich in resources, very important strategically. If it were in some other place, they wouldn't care. So therefore, the whole idea is to create an other to replace the Soviet Union other. So therefore, it becomes very Orientalist in this sense, and therefore it brings back the Orientalism that was described by Hull and the two articles before. Okay, so basically I answered your question, but I haven't referred to a particular text. In Huntington, there's a particular text that he groups himself, the United States, with the European nations. Okay. Any other questions? If you're not sure, you do not understand, let me know what you're not sure about. Also, we will try to cover as much as possible, but but at the same time, I don't want to rush moving through the text, because there's a lot of there are many. There's the first level between the lines, then there's the second level of between the lines of the lines. So you need to be able to read the text, see what is between the lines, and then go to the third level of what is between the lines of the text. So with Huntington, you can read them at least 3 depths of the same text. And when you go from the printed text to between the lines to the second level, you see the Orientalism working, and how he's very skillful in presenting his argument, and kind of moving the reader between the levels. If the reader is not aware that there are 2 or 3 levels, you will just be kind of shaped like Maltine. As you go read, you will say that there's something wrong, but you're not sure where or what. You can say that he's Orientalist, but he's also a policy thinker of the West. He's one of the main policy thinkers of the United States at the time. Yeah. So why is his book so important? Because those who are in, say, arms deals and profiting, they need this sort of book. This is the marketing for the economy of the United States. Yeah, and all the and the West, particularly. Yes, it is relevant to the video. The video, you will understand more about what Huntington means when the video covers 20 years of 25 years after Huntington, or 30 years after Huntington, what the region has become. So therefore, what he was talking about actually comes to be happening, not because of and then you would say, well, look, he said this 30 years ago, and look where we have become. We have become like what he was describing. Yes, but was this just by chance, or some people designed it to be, the whole region to be like this, but through very, very serious interventions? No, it's by design. And the Davos people are the people who designed, who are the people key in designing this. This is why he talks about them as being the 1%, who the 50 million who are powerful, who shaped the globe. Yeah, they shaped the politics, they shaped the economic trade, whether the focus is on arms or on people or on development or just on consumer or whatnot. Okay. Or on bribes as well. Okay, so we go to language. If there are no questions, we continue to language. So here, for him, the central element in any cultural or civilization are language and religion. So here's another trick. What is the trick here? This should be obvious.
The language is the key. If you know the language, you can be in the same culture. So the language is the main. It's the main basic for any civilization and culture.
Yes, but what else?
For communication, for people to speak with each other, to understand, so they can build a civilization by how we can say it, by understanding the value of each culture they want to have, I think.
Okay, and then anybody else?
Doctor, he's trying to get into religion discourse through the language, which he predict or presupposed it as a universal language, as an English.
Yeah, good point. So therefore, if you speak English, you're of a particular religion.
Mm-hmm.
Not necessarily, but what he's trying to say is that there's the universal civilization will create a new religion, the religion of those who speak English, and therefore those who are able to communicate their mutual interests in English. Okay, that is a sophisticated point. So therefore, why he puts the language in the category of universal civilization is that, okay, if one of the key aspects of universal civilization is speaking English, why? And one of the key aspects of the Davos is that you speak English. So therefore, if you are one of the 51% of the globe that affects and shapes the policies of the globe, therefore it is not just a language. You need to then adapt their way of life, their way of priorities, the individualist approach, the neoliberal approach, and all that, and how that translates into economy, policy, culture, consumer products, and whatnot. As many specializations as the people who come and attend the Davos. Okay, but the other thing is that anybody want to add? What if look? He begins with, he says language. The central elements of any culture or civilization are language and religion. What should be the title here? Based on the sentence, what should be the title?
Language and religion.
Yes, exactly. Why does he take out the religion and say language? This is a way of playing with the reader. He says, okay, language. He doesn't say religion. He wouldn't dare say religion, otherwise it becomes a religious war, which he is promoting.
He
embeds the religion in the language. Why? Because then which religion is very attached to its language?
Christianity. Yes,
no.
Sorry?
Not Christianity. Christianity, you have the Latin, you have the English, then you have different Bibles you have the Protestant Bible according to St. James.
Okay, you mean the numbers? So
which religion is very attached to its language?
Islam.
Yes, you can only read you can only recite the Quran in Arabic.
Yes, okay, but I wanted to say that what drew my attention to when I first read this paragraph, he starts with language, and he then shows that language and religion are the main elements of one civilization. But then when he starts talking about religion, he says that religion comes even before language. So why didn't you start your discussion with religion rather than starting it with language and drawing the assumption that language is the most important element that shapes the identity or the uniqueness of one civilization?
Okay.
But then come to negate it, saying that religion is the main aspect in the formation of one civilization.
Okay, a very good observation. Okay, try to answer it. And the clue to answering it is who's the reader?
Meaning the spectator?
Yeah, who's reading the text? No, not the spectator. Who's reading the text? There are no spectators in this book.
Okay.
There are spectators of the clash as a whole, but not this book. The point is, if you are from this region and you're reading Samuel Huntington, we're still on?
Yes, we are.
You see the text, yeah?
Oh, yes.
You are, but your voice, it's quite just...
Okay, all right. Yeah, I'll bring back the
mic. It's better.
Okay, I'll bring one more. Oh, okay. Good. So, if you are the reader from this region, and you happen to be, if he says that the problem is the language and religion, then the radical people in this region will say, look, he's going back to the Crusade language. So therefore, Huntington is the Crusader. He doesn't want to give that. He wants you to really say, focus on the language. If you want to be part of the Davos, the influential people, you need to focus on the language. Then, but in the same time, he says why he focuses on language as the title, but says the two elements are language and religion. And therefore, if you are of if you are other religion, the attachment to the language is not that key. But in Islamic, it is very key. Okay, so therefore, if you want to, as the one of you who pointed out just before about this kind of new religion, yeah, he wants to. The way to establish this new religion, you can have your own old religion as a cultural, ethnic thing, but your practicing religion would be the religion which encompasses English, the new value system, and the new global civilization. So therefore, essentially, if you are of this category of people, you would be in conflict, always conflicting between what the belief system is then pushed to something that is cultural. It is not practice based, while your practice based aspects of life and view of the politics of the world would be the new universal civilization. But you need to know the English. Okay, so when we go on, if a universal civilization is emerging, there should be tendencies toward the emergence of a universal language and a universal religion. Very interesting. So he's saying that there's just supposed to be a universal religion based on English. This is very serious. So if you're religious oriented, whether Jew or Hindu or whatnot, or Muslim or Christian even, you would say that okay, then there's a problem here. You're creating a new universal religion, which only speaks English, and therefore the new the language of this universal religion, which is in a way a component of this universal civilization which is promoting. So what he talks about universal civilization has the aspects of a English language, and it's also a new religion, the religion of the Davos people. And we talked about early on in the class when there's the Oxford Dictionary, which talks about social human religions or new religion, new social religions, which kind of replace the how to say the revelation, the religions by revelation, okay, or through prophets. So therefore, when he is talking, this is here you have a lot of things to talk about. First, he focuses on language, even though essentially he's saying language and religion. If you are a policymaker, and you read the first sentence, or if you are an arms trader, you will say, okay, then you need to make a religion the other, the whole religion the other. If you want to bring the other to you, like say Prince Bandar in the Bin Sultan, make him speak English, but adopt the religion of the global civilization, which is Western interests oriented, corrupt, and has nothing to do with the revelational practices, and therefore you have problems with at the beginning of the program. There is this the woman who investigated and said that they were doing non-Islamic practices or behavior, which is very very mild way of saying a lot of things was wrong. So therefore, you have two religions actually conflicting. People with two conflicting religions within themselves. The religion of this new civilization, and the religion which they're supposed to be practicing, but they do not practice because they have other priorities. Okay, So if you have these type of people, then this is the ideal. These are the ideal people in the region that Huntington needs. For the policymaker, you need to invest in such people who claimed one thing but are in practice are something else, and that their main religion of worship or practice, it has nothing to do with what they claim to be. It has more to do with what they practice behind the scenes, and the dealings and the impact it has economically and developmentally on the whole region. Okay, so no evidence exists. So then for a universal civilization, it could mean that an increasing proportion of the world's population speaks English. Okay, fine. So therefore, knowing English is good. Yes, it could be good. I mean, most of the literature or which you will be reading when you study is in English. So therefore, the English opens doors to knowledge. Yes, but he's talking about another use of English, which is much more focused. So no evidence exists to support this proposition. So he would say that it could mean two things, only one of which would support the case of universal civilization. So the 2 points is, it could mean that an increasing proportion of the world's population speaks English, but the problem is that there's no evidence of this. The evidence will go to the table below. And then the most reliable evidence does not, which admittedly cannot be very precise, shows that just the opposite, that this is not the case. People are not more people are not learning English proportionally to the population of the globe. The available data from 758 to 92 suggests that the overall pattern of language use is different. Okay, so it did not change dramatically, except the proportion declines occurred in proportion of the people speaking English, French, German, Russian, and Japanese. That the smaller decline occurred in promotion speaking Mandarin. We will let's go to see the table. So here he has. This is from 58. The increase or decrease in people leave the globe, percentage of the globe speaking English, or in a very formal languages. In 92, you had from 2.5 in 58 to 33.5. It's about 10 points. It's 8 points. Okay, 8 points more. Bengali, 2.7 to 3.2. So you had, from Bengali, you had 6 points. No, 5 points. Okay? From English, you have a decline from 9.8 to 7.6. You have 2.2 points. Or 22 points. Hindi 5 increase from 5.2 to 6.2. So you have more than one. You have maybe one. You have 12 points. Mandarin, which is Chinese, mostly spoken in China, 15.6 to 15.2. So you have a decline in people speaking Mandarin. Interesting. In 1992, Russian 5.5 to 4.9. You have decreased. Spanish, you have increase. Why? Because of Latin America. Okay, so the increase in population in Latin America kind of increases the Spanish speaking. So English is on the decline. Yes. So therefore, his first point is that language is an element. He kind of how to say? He discredits himself, the seriousness of language. He says that language is very important, but at the same time, right after saying that language is, now notice how he works this. He says language is important, but then he says that language and religion is important. But in order to the reader to get relaxed, that even though I want it to be important, it in fact is not important, because you see that English is declining, and therefore Arabic is increasing. So therefore, if you are from this region, you say, okay, but So therefore, this even what if you want this to be important, it is not important in 1992 because the statistics don't speak like that. So in one sense, a language foreign to 92% of the world cannot be the world's language. So he's saying that, which is contradicting his main point here, that the central elements of any culture or civilization are language and religion. So, but language, English language, is not cannot be the world's language. So, in another sense, however, which is his second point, it could be so described if it is the language which people from different language groups and cultures use to communicate with each other, if it is the world's lingua franca, or linguistic terms, the world's principal language, the wider community language, the language of the wider community. Okay? So therefore, he says that, well, percentage-wise, even though English is in the decreasing, it could be the language which becomes dominant by the fact or by that it is able to people from different cultures to speak this language and therefore can communicate. So therefore, if you want people from different cultures to have this, your way of transmitting the new religion is through the people from these different cultures and their policies and their economic practices and their value system and their priorities. Okay? People who need to communicate with each other have to find means to do so. Okay, obviously. At one level, they can rely on specially trained professionals who have become fluent in two or more languages. Okay, this is technical, but the point is that if you have if China is now the dominant economic, now we're talking 30 years after this, around about 30 years after this. But now, if China is the dominant, you would not expect all the Chinese to learn English. If you want to establish relations with Chinese, you need to learn Chinese so that you can speak their own language. So that, which then means that then you kind of become your language skills become shaped by where the interests are. Okay. So then, when we talk about here, we talk about the speakers of principal Chinese and Western languages, Mandarin. English. So you have you have also the decrease. He's being more detailed. Okay. So when you talk about to continue, that however is awkward, time-consuming and expensive if you want to learn the language. Hence, throughout history, lingua francas emerged Latin in the classical and in medieval worlds. In the medieval world, you had Latin. Most books of science and religion and literature were written in Latin. And where were most of the libraries? In the churches, in the monasteries, because the clergy were the ones who were able to learn, because they spoke Latin. And therefore, if you wanted to go to the main universities in the Middle Ages, you needed to learn the Latin language. So therefore, the language for knowledge was, at the time, say for example in Europe, was Latin. The French for several centuries in the West, Swahili in parts of Africa, English throughout much of the world, and the latter half of the 20th century. Diplomats, businessmen, scientists, tourists. So you need to have this knowledge of English in order to be able to communicate and promote your ideas and advance academically and professionally in the world. However, in this sense, English is the world's way of communicating interculturally, just as Christian calendar is the world's way of tracking time. Arabic numbers are the world's way of counting, and the metric system is, for the most part, the world's way of measuring. So therefore, English is in this way, however, is intercultural communication. It presupposes the existence of separate cultures. So therefore, the use of English is the language to use when you have different cultures. So rather than transform the language of all cultures of the globe, you make English the language of transmittal or communication between the different cultures. Okay. Now, when we go to, again, throughout, you can read, but then throughout, he talks about throughout history, page 62, throughout history, the distribution of language in the world has reflected the distribution of power in the world. So therefore, language is power. If Latin in the Middle Ages was important, therefore those who knew Latin or from Italy, or those who learned Latin, therefore became knowledgeable. The most widely spoken languages, English, Mandarin, Spanish, French, Arabic, and Russian, are or were the languages of imperial states, which actively promoted the use of their own languages by other peoples. Shifts in the distribution of powers produced shifts in the use of languages. 2 centuries of British American colonial, commercial, industrial, scientific, and fiscal power have left substantial legacy in higher education, government, trade, and technology throughout the world. So now the language over the past century was English and French to some extent, but now also Chinese is becoming in this century. Following independence of most of the former colonies and attempted in varying degrees with various success to replace the imperial language with language of indigenous ones. So some post-colonial states or states that were able to get rid of the immediate colonization tried to change their languages from the colonial language to the local language. For example, the Maghreb. The former language was French, and then it became, some states have adopted Arabic and French. In India, the educational language is English. So therefore, and he talks about Russia in Chinese and displaced, and probably in the distant future, he says China displaces the West as the dominant civilization of the world. English will give way to Mandarin as the world's lingua franca. So he predicts that Chinese will become more dominant than English. Okay, but if the Chinese language is the one that is becoming more dominant, why are the Chinese not the threat? He just says, by a matter of fact, he predicts that the Chinese will be the language will be the dominant. If the key to global universal civilization is language, and then as he says, language and religion, and the Chinese language is the one that is becoming dominant, why are the Chinese not
adopt a basic religion for the nation? But for China, isn't not because of the language of civilization, it's just because of the economy. Because they have a strong economy. That's why many people, even me, for example, yes, I'm interested in Chinese culture and history and extra, but that's not the case for everybody. Many of them, the people I know, they study, for example, Chinese language, are going just because of for work, because it's the biggest power next because of its economy, not because of anything else, in my point of view. And they don't have a religion. So isn't that just...
Well, to some extent, you can say that, okay, if they're the socialist, if the new religion in China is the Chinese socialism, then yes, you can say that they don't have a religion. But if it has Chinese socialism with some aspects of Taoism and Confucianism, then you have maybe, if there is a religion, it would be the socialism merged with the Confucian. But the Confucian and the socialist, but definitely do not believe in a god. They believe in powers of the Confucian or the Taoist. It has to do with nature, the forces of nature, not a god whom one is accountable for. So therefore, in Chinese belief system, you are not accountable to anyone in the metaphysical sense. It's you aspire to make balance from the metaphysical into the physical, into the world practice. Okay, it's different from the people who believe in God, that there is Yawm Hisab. There's another life, and therefore you are accountable for what you do in this life. Okay? Now, The point here being that yes, okay, you can just it's the same point like Huntington says, that you can learn English so that you can communicate with others. Okay, but the others that are learning English, they are communicating cross continents. It is not just with one group of people in one continent. If you learn Chinese, it is to deal with it is to interact with the Chinese in China, for the most part. It is not learning Chinese so that the Americans can talk Chinese, and the Europeans can talk Chinese, the Africans can talk Chinese, and the Russians can talk Chinese. Okay, so here we're talking about the language that has assumed control or power, predominance over other languages by colonial legacy, and the most dominant colonial power that spread from various parts of the globe was the British Empire, and then the settler colonial systems, which were also English and English speaking, and kind of benefit from that system. So therefore, the English language became the dominant global language by colonial heritage, and the predominance of the British Empire, and the settler colonials that kind of were offshoots or byproducts of the British colonial system. Okay, and therefore you have Africans, Asians, Americans, South Americans, or people in this region speaking English or French, but predominantly English if you're talking about the Sykes-Picot configuration. Okay, you have Maghreb French, Lebanon, Syria French, but all other countries focus on English, the GC and the English educational system and metric system. Okay, so therefore the point here is that, okay, he says language and religion are important, but because China does not have a religion which challenges, say, the West, which could be a Christian or Judeo-Christian or Judaic, okay? So therefore, for him, even though the language indicator is one that the threat should be from the Chinese language, his focus in the end is that he leaves the issue open when he talks about the at the end here throughout history, the distribution of language, so therefore it has shifted with the powers, and as former colonies move toward independence. Okay, so therefore he's kind of saying why the English language became the most prominent one, and then why education was important. So the end of the Soviet Empire and of the Cold War prompted the proliferation of rejuvenation of languages which had been suppressed or forgotten. So therefore you have the Georgian, the Ukrainian, Lithuanian, Latvian, Estonian, and Armenian, and other languages. And then you have the language of Azerbaijan, Kyrgyzstan, Turkmenistan, Uzbekistan, which are Central Asia, and shifted from the Cyrillic script of the Russian masters to their own script, which is Turkish variation, because they were part of the Ottoman Empire at some point. So therefore, the Central Asia speaks dialect or a form of Turkish, and therefore they are closer to the Turkish Ottoman heritage than, say, the Russian under the Soviet Union. So therefore. The Turkish and Arabic borrowings, linguistic sediment left the Ottoman Empire's 450 years presence in the Balkans have come back into vogue. So there, Bosnia now speaks a form of Turkish. Okay, so he put again. He talks about language, and then he says that the elements of any cultural civilization is language and religion. Then he has a separate thing about religion. Here, which is the other point. How are you doing? Do you have any questions? Do you need a break?
For me, everything is clear.
Okay. Anybody else? Are you okay? Can you still? Shall we continue with religion?
Yes, all is good, Doctor.
Okay. So we go now to religion. So he actually, even though the language, he says that the important elements are language and religion, so now he goes to religion as a separate item. But the first part, he kind of put the language into, he put religion into the language. So actually he's talking, basically in both aspects, he's talking about religion more than the language. Okay? You understand this point? The universal religion, I'll just read the first language, first sentence, just like we read the first sentence of the language. The universal religion is only slightly more likely to emerge than is a universal language. So therefore he says that the universal religion has more chances of becoming actual than a universal language. So what is he talking about here? He's not talking about the importance of religion. He's talking about the prospects of the new religion. So therefore, while the point here is that most of the religion, the talk of the significance of the religion in the universal civilization, he puts it in the language in the previous section. Okay. Now, when he talks about religion, he's not discussing the impact of religion on the universal civilization. Okay, this is a project, and now he's talking about how you can make the new religion of the universal civilization. So, whereas the before is kind of what is, and how what is. And why the English language, even though it is the less spoken, but it is the one that communicates between continents. Now he says that in order to have the new civilization, you need to have a new religion. Okay, and the way of the new religion is the English language, not by understanding English literature as much as by understanding the people who speak this English language, and the people who control the main keys of power in the globe, financially, economically, politically, and legally, and elsewhere. Okay, so the late 20th century has been a scene of global resurgence of religions around the world. This resurgence has involved the intensification of religious consciousness and the rise of fundamentalist movements. So now he's saying that if you want to have a new religion, you have the problem with the new religion is that it faces a problem of increase in the numbers of people of particular religions, and which has enforced or given a rise to fundamentalist movements. Okay. But who are the fundamentalist movements here? He has a way of kind of making it acceptable. So it has thus reinforced the differences among religions. And he's talking, his first example of the religious conflict is the one that has occurred in the between at some point he was talking about the Balkans, but anyhow, so therefore he says that yet to 20% of 20.7% increase in non-believers closely matched. Okay. So if we look at this is a table of the which religions have increased and which religions have decreased in numbers of people around the globe since 1900 to 85 or 80, and then you had an estimate 80 and 2000. Okay, so Western Christian from 26.9 to 26.9, so it stayed the same. And here we're talking about Western Christian, meaning what? Meaning the Catholic Church, the Protestant, Anglican, and all those who broke away from Constantinople, the Eastern Orthodox Church in the 1100s. Okay, the Orthodox Christian, okay, you have an increase from the Eastern Christian, 7.5 to 2. Or no, you have a significant decrease. Sorry, around 5 percentage points. Okay, so considerable decrease. Muslim, you have increase from 12 to 19, 8 points increase. Non-religious from 2 to 17. This is the highest increase. So therefore, when he talks about non-religious, according to this, they should be the most threatening, but they are not. It is the Huntington. Even though they are almost 17 points increase. Okay, then you have the Hindu from 12 to 13, the Buddhist from 7 to 5 decrease, Chinese folk from 23 to 2.5. Chinese folk, the belief systems, not the socialist Chinese. Tribal 6 to 1, and atheist 0 to 4. So those who are the ones non-religious are the ones that have increased mostly 17%. Christianity has gone down or stayed the same. The Western Christian, the Orthodox Christian has gone down. Muslim has increased 7 points. So you do not. The second largest increase after non-religious, the atheists. Are the Muslims by 7 points, and these are where these are not mostly increasing in Europe. These are increasing in the region, with high birth rate and young populations. Okay, so therefore, in the statistics show that if the main challenge to a universal religion here is the Muslim religion. Okay, but statistically it should be the non-religious should be the main challenge to the religion. But apparently this is not significant. So therefore, what the point here is showing is that even though the tables show something, Huntington is focusing on a particular reading of the table.
Doctor, sorry, but can I share my opinion?
Yeah.
He is trying to make a division not only between Christianity or Christendom and Islam. He also trying to make a division between. Yes, it is a Christianity hegemony or superiority, but at the same time he makes a division between Western or Catholic and Orthodox, and he attributed the Orthodox Christianity to does he attributed it to the Middle Eastern countries?
Yeah, yes, but also to Russia. Russia is Greek Orthodox.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, and the Serbs are Greek Orthodox. They are not Catholic. They're part of the Eastern religion, and Greece is Greek, obviously. Okay, so and Constantinople is Istanbul. Before the Ottoman Empire, it was Constantinople, or before the Ottoman Empire, it was the Constantinople. That was the center of the Christian belief system, until the Pope in Italy then broke away from the center of Constantinople and established the papacy in Rome. Okay, that was the first break-off. Then the second break-off came from the Anglican, from Henry the Sixth, or Henry V, one of the Henrys. He said, I want to marry another queen, and therefore I want to establish my own religion. So he became Anglican. He separated himself from the dominance of the church. Then you had Martin Luther from Germany, see the corruption of the papacy and the political system there, and said, we want to break up and we become Protestant. And therefore, when you have the new versions, then the new in the North America, you have this Presbyterian and other belief systems, which are also break-offs from the break-off of the break-off of the break-off. Okay, and there it becomes more new religions and human religions rather than the religion of the authentic work by revelation. Okay, so yes, the point is that in Orientalism, yeah, they deliberately separate between the Western Christian, but what they mean by the Western Christian is those who is Anglo-Saxon Protestant or Protestant in essence, and everything, even Catholic, is not quite Western. When you talk about this kind of industrial revolution type, because if you notice in Europe, those with the Catholic beliefs, most of them, they except for France, those of the Catholic belief were not able to make the shift from the middle age political systems, the kingdoms, to the modern state systems, which Tilly was talking about. It was basically the Germans and the British who didn't have the Catholic faith, who were able to break off with this new ethic that actually you build, you manifest, and you design and you activate God's will by what you work on the ground. Okay, so therefore, accumulation of land and property of people who are not believers becomes part of God's will, quote unquote, to make the world better. يعني in Islam you have إصلاح إعمار الدنيا، إنه شأن إنه يعمر الدنيا، بس هون إعمار الأرض، عفوا إعمار الأرض. هون في عندك إعمار الأرض، ولكن خصوصية لمين بيحتكر مفهوم شو معنى الإعمار، ومين مقصي من الإعمار، ومين مقصي من في الدنيا والآخرة من أي إعمار، زي آل كنعان المنعوتين ده آل كنعان. ماشي، وبالتالي هون ال Orientalist discourse has a way of kind of selecting only the white Protestant faith as the ones who are able to build the land and therefore acquire certain privileges from God by doing so. Okay, now in one of my sessions at the beginning, when we talked about the Orientalism is targeting also the Christians and by differentiating between the Western Christian and the Eastern Christianity. This is textual. This is the text. Okay, this is a text showing that Orientalism also breaks where you are, what belief system you are in which region. If you are in the wrong region with the right faith, then according to this Orientalist version, you have the wrong faith. Because the Eastern religion, according to Huntington, does not carry modernization. It does not modernize. The only we're jumping ahead, but the only path to modernization is the Western version of religion. Okay. Now Huntington was a Jew, so therefore his interest is the Judaic Christian version, very Judaic Christian, not Christian kind of with some criticism towards the Judaic faith. No, the one that merges and supports the Judaic with the Christian and makes them both one. So his reference is the Judaic secular version, not the Judaic revelationary one. He is not bound by morals. not even the Jewish or Judaic morals. Okay, he has other agendas, other ideas. But so basically here, when he talks about non-Orthodox Christian, he's talking about all Russia, all Eastern Europe, and southern Eastern Europe, which is Greece, the Balkans, but also the Orthodox in this region, the Eastern Orthodox, from Turkey, from Constantinople eastward. All the Greek Orthodox are part of the problem, because they are in this region. Their culture is more of this region than of Western. And what determines whether an Orthodox can be part of the Western region is already predetermined by that, according to Huntington, there is no modernization that has occurred under Orthodox Christianity. It's only Western Christianity that has, and even this is very broad Western. It's very, if you want to be very particularly tall, you talk about Protestant plus Christianity, not even the Catholic version, which is a break-off from the Orthodox. Okay, and therefore it becomes easier for the break-offs of the break-offs of the break-offs to kind of merge the human interpretation of what it is to exist in this world with the divine God's will, and therefore you have this divinity studies. So actually you're constantly redesigning or re-understanding the religion. But here, what the religion Huntington is talking about, because he's not interested in the Christian, anything to do with Christianity. He is interested in something to do with a new religion that is a religion of power, a religion in which self-interest is the mode, and a religion in which modernization, according to the Western blueprint, is the reference, even though not everyone can replicate that or repeat that. And therefore, in order to establish this new religion, you have some sort of you have to deal with challenging religions. So when he talk, and here he explains, during the last decades of the 20th century, both Islam and Christianity significantly expanded their numbers in Africa, and the major shift towards Christianity occurred in South Korea. In rapid modernization, this is where he talks about modernization. In rapidly modernizing societies, if the traditional religion is unable to adapt to the requirements of modernization, the potential exists for the spread of Western Christianity and Islam. Okay, so if the religion of the locals cannot generate modernization, then it falls into either two: Western Christianity or Islam, which is counter-Western. Okay, in these societies, the most successful protagonists of Western culture are not neoclassical economists or crusading democrats or multinational corporation executives. They are and most likely will continue to be Christian missionaries. Neither Adam Smith nor Tocqueville will meet the psychological, emotional, moral, and social needs of urban migrants and first-generation school graduates. Jesus Christ may not meet them either, but he is likely to have a better chance. So therefore, Adam Smith may not, and Thomas Jefferson of the United. Adam Smith is the thinker of of the economic wealth of nations, and he had this concept about the invisible hand that let the economy work according to profit, and everything else there's an invisible hand in the economy which rebalances according to supply and demand. Thomas Jefferson is from the United States, obviously. So if these people do not affect the people in South Korea, you would have Jesus Christ who might be able to influence them, but he will not be able to maybe shift them into modernization by himself. And Christianity does not do that job automatically. So in the long run, however, Muhammad wins out. Why? Christianity spreads primarily by conversion, Islam by conversion and reproduction. So the percentage of Christians in the world peaked at 30% in the 80s, leveled off and is now in decline, and probably approximately about 2.5% of the world's population, 25% of the world's population will be Muslim by 2025. Okay, so as a result of their extremely high rates of population growth, the proportion of Muslims in the world will continue to increase dramatically, mounting 20% of the world's population, amounting to 20%, about the turn of the century, surpassing the number of Christians some years later, and probably accounting for 30% of the world's population in 2025. So what does this mean? So here is the beginning of the proposition. Before we go into universal civilization sources, we will take a break. But what have you taken away from Huntington, from just his introduction? What is he saying really? He ends this section by saying that the Muslims are the challenge. The challenge to this new religion, and therefore they also pose a challenge to this new religion because their religion is very much intertwined with their language. Okay, and the belief system cannot be. You do not have a break off from the break off like in the break off of the Christian faith from Constantinople, the eastern to the western in Rome, and then from the western another break off to in the Anglican in the 1500s, and then in the Martin Luther breaks away with the German version of Protestantism, Protestant faith, and then you have the new break-offs again in North America with the Presbyterian and Methodist and other types. Okay, so his main challenge to this religion, of a new religion, is the Islamic religion. And therefore, he doesn't show the. I showed you a map last time of where Muslims are. Let me see if I can trace back that. Around the globe. Well, there is in Huntington. There's in a book. If you have the book, in his book on page. I can send it to you later on. In the previous chapter, in chapter 2, he has a map of the world, and so it clearly shows where the Muslims are and which parts of the world the Muslims are. So it's most of North Africa, Middle East, Gulf, Mashriq, Maghrib, and then going up to Central Asia, Iran, Turkey, Kazakhstan, Turkmenistan, Azerbaijan, and all these places around the Caspian Sea, which have a very high percentage of gas. 70% of the gas of the world is located around the Caspian Sea basin, and 70% of the oil of the world is in the Gulf, around 60 to 70%. So therefore, and it's the best oil, it's the high quality oil. It's not the fossil oil. Okay. Which is why and also the geostrategic is that the Middle East or the Arab world connects main seaways, the Mediterranean with the Red Sea, with the Pacific, with the Indian Ocean and the Pacific, or the Atlantic Ocean. So strategically, it's very important that and the climate is conducive to agriculture. So you can have your own resources. You have water in the Mashriq. You have the Nile in Sudan, Egypt, and then you have acceptable climate in the Maghreb. In Libya, you have oil. So therefore, that is kind of the main aspect. So any questions before we take a break? Things to think about. Do you... 'Things to think about for when we return. Where do you see do you see hulls? In the Okay. So this is for when we come back. We come back at 3:10. So.